see on the slide that here is Konstantin's name, because this research project we did together between me and him. That was back in Russia, in Moscow, because originally I'm from Russia. I grew up in St. Petersburg. My first part of education was science. I started quite early when I was 14. And then I moved into different areas of science, from chemistry, biochemistry, physical and physics, technology, and neuroscience. So this research project was particularly dedicated into the meditation. And the relevance today for us is we speak a lot about energy here in different sense, both the energy as a spiritual one, the energy that we need to be conserving and preserving within Earth. But the point is that as a therapist, I see every day people who are unwell. They are mentally unwell, physically and emotionally unwell. And that has changed hugely, particularly since pandemic. Most of you already been touched in one way or the other of mental health issues. At least, I think 5 or 10 of you have experienced some kind of depressive episodes in the past few years, maybe something else. And we all know the positive aspects of meditation. But the question is, what is meditation? Please raise your hands, all the people who've been meditating, at least once in your life. Okay. But there are enough of us. Okay, so each of us did something else there. And I'm honored to present this work because it was not done just by myself and Konstantin. It's been done by 3 very particular and very dear people to me as a research scientist. It's Natalia Kolmogorova. She's retired at this stage. She was helping us with one aspect of the research. It's Leonid Noskin. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. He was a mentor to me, and this work in many ways is dedicated in his memory. He is still to this day the #1 person in Russia who created the level and the idea of adaptation as the question of how healthy we are. It's not the absence of illness, it's how well we adapt. And Anton Varlamov, who was my supervisor during that time. So what is meditation? As you see on this small picture, there are 3 stages, let's say, and one is meditating about a doggy in the mountains, another one is just about the landscape, and someone else who is in a business suit is meditating on the picture. So each of us think about something else of meditation. There are all sorts of things out there right now. Probably you've heard movement meditation, probably you've been experiencing active visualization. So all of them are related to different states of consciousness. So between myself and Konstantin, we had a very interesting debate and discussion over the past many years about different altered states of consciousness. And as a neuroscientist, I had to define, together with him, the main aspects, what to measure. So when we are meditating, the main question is, where is our focus? Is it outside of us? So for example, you're meditating on a candle. There is a candle in front of you, so the focus is with open eyes out there. Or it is inwards, like in Vipassana meditation, where you slow down your breathing and you start to observe different parts of your body. So that focus will be inside. The next question is, what is the awareness and where it is placed? Is it outside, so I'm aware of my surroundings, or I'm more inside with my inner phenomena? So dependent on these just 2 factors, we have meditations which are more external focus, so we focus on something outside, but we are aware of our own body, our thoughts and our feelings. Or our awareness is more outside and the focus is outside. Otherwise, our focus is inside and our awareness is inside. So therefore, we block out everything around us. So as a result, this creates a very interesting question. and helping us to identify which types of meditations are out there. So we, for the first time, basically divided all meditative states into 4 different categories. Most of you probably went online and maybe been guided by some app like Medi app or Sonoma and others. So all of them will speak about slow down your breathing and start to observe your breath. When you inhale and when you exhale. Or focus on one point and absorb your thoughts. So all of this is Zen practices. They came from Zen tradition and then being popularized in the past, let's say, 40, 50 years in the West. The second part is what we call vipassana, where we become aware of our own body. So we observe not just the fact that I breathe, but also how do I breathe? That my breath, for example, has the beginning, the middle, and the end. There is a space between my inhale and exhale. Or in classical Vipassana tradition, we will focus on a particular part of our body. Normally, it's not bigger than the palm of our hand, somewhere on top. And then we observe all the phenomena happening there. Initially, this practice and practices like this being introduced in order for people, for the monks, to start to detach themselves and observe the way their attention works, how we label things. That, oh, I have a pain. So it's a negative phenomenon. Oh, I have something nice happening at the top of my head. It's a positive phenomenon. Or I just feel the air at the top of my head. So these 3 phenomena will be negative, positive, or neutral. And the thing is, all of this was taken out of context when we brought this out of the monasteries into our normal society. So there are many meditations like this. The next one is probably very dear to India. All of the bhakti type of meditation will focus on the heart. In Buddhist tradition as well, there are many of them. For example, loving kindness is one of them. When we focus on the purity of the heart, when we focus on the openness of the heart to something greater than we are. And then the Dzogchen practices, which are encompassing all. So Dzogchen as a tradition was there even before Buddhism. In fact, it is very well connected to one tradition. And in such practices, we see that everything is perfect around us. The world is immense, like our dear Dr. John been presenting to us, enormous purity and beauty of nature. The only problem is us, we are not aligned. So we start to align ourselves with the harmony. And then we start to realize that actually I am within the balance. There are thoughts, but they are there to rest. We just put everything on pause and being ourselves in the infinite here now. All of the meditations as transcendental meditation that you probably heard of, many of you, and others are related to this. So that's how we define 4 types of meditations or meditative states. There are many more than that. Probably you've been hearing about active imagination, where you visualize certain things, but they're not exactly meditations actually. And we can prove this scientifically. So I will just briefly go into the question, is it possible to measure the meditative states? Yes and no at the same time. For a simple reason. People who are coming from tradition, they don't know the scientific protocol quite often. And the other way around, those who are scientists don't have the experience in meditation the same way as sages. They've been doing that for ages. And for me, as a scientist, was the main question. If the person is meditating for a very long time, the physiology obviously changes. I will show you in a minute exactly how. Are they drawn to the meditation because of this predisposition, or that fact that we are meditating is altering our physiology as a result and we are changing entirely? So that is kind of a chicken and egg type of a problem as a scientist. And various traditions have their own standards. It's very easy to measure things when you measure sports. Like there is a golden standard for things. But in meditation, can you align 10 gurus that will be meditating perfectly? We realized it's nearly impossible because each meditation will be different. So we had to identify some factors. One of them being posture. So probably you've seen the monks who are sitting or yourself meditating, everything's going fine the first 5 minutes, and then you start to go down. And you feel like your spine is not aligned, and that means you are not meditating, actually, because you've gone out of your body. Your meditative state is very much related to the physical matrix that we are occupying. So if we measure posture, basically how straight the spine is, how much we alter between left and right, forwards and backwards, through the spatial analysis, it's a visual analysis plus a very interesting device called Force Platform, we will be able to see when the person is actually going out of that state. So that was factor number 2. And overall coherence within the system. It's very vague on one side, but I will show you how it's possible to measure easily. In our center in London, where Constantine is based, we have something called ICIP, which is transferred to as Integrated Computerized Information Platform, and it has in itself the principle which is connecting the middle is ICIP itself, the science with allopathy, means the classical medicine, and classical parameters that are derived in medicine that we see in hospitals, and then wisdom traditions with complementary alternative medicines. So we're not trying to say that allopathy is bad and traditional medicines are very good and we need to follow just that, because if you have an open wound and you have 50 bones broken, you need to be in ICU and be operated. You can't do homeopathy there. However, for things which are long-term, which are chronic, it's important to have things that are going to be suitable, like traditional medicines, because they've had experience for thousands of years in comparison to our modern medicine, which is just 200 years old. And then science should not be opposing wisdom traditions, and I think this is extremely relevant to our discussion here during these days, because spirituality or sages are actually in dialogue with science. So as a result, we created a model, quantum-integrated model, which is vast, where the person comes in, they fill out a very intensive questionnaire about themselves. We do the measurements, then the questionnaire is very small, just 600 questions approximately. So it takes a little bit of time to fill out, but it gives us a very clear picture about the person, where things are in themselves at this stage. The devices are giving us the objective part, and it's from the standard things like blood pressure, oxygen uptake, glucose levels, and things like that, all the way to more subtle quantum and sub-quantum devices. And then we do our treatments. And today, actually, all of you will be very much welcome to come. I will be in room 503, I think, it's just down the hall, where you'll be able to experience 2 types of our devices. One is diagnostic device, and another one is therapy device. So it's a miniature sample that we can offer people to experience here. So if we apply the principle of ICIP to the scientific research, it comes to this. We've been creating a complex where we checked the lung, heart, and vessels, basically creating the question of adaptation, how well the system is adapting. So if a person is meditating, what is happening with their heart and lungs? How well they're breathing? What is happening with heart rate variability? Because it will show us if the person is in altered state of consciousness or they are in the normal state. So that was one way. Then we did EEG, electroencephalography, where we have a cap, and it gets very, very subtle electrographic signals from the skin of the scalp. And then we have force platform, which helps us to see the posture. So basically what I was speaking before about the balance between left, right, up, down, and so forth. So this is, I will just go briefly, that's the example of the device which is called spiroarterial cardiorhythmography, or SACR for short. It helps to identify what is happening when you inhale. Does your heart start to beat more fast? Do you have more lung capacity? And when you exhale, what is happening with your blood pressure? So these three parameters of blood pressure, the heart rate and its variability, and the lung capacity all together creates a very clear picture. Because if those systems are in harmonious motion, then it means we're adapting. If they're not, it means something is happening. This is the example of one of our graphs. So that is actual graph from Constantine, where he was doing one of the types of meditation, basically the exhaustion one, the integrated one. And we see that throughout inhale and exhale, the heart rate is almost minimal, and the blood pressure is also almost ideal. So basically, we're eating things out. So Constantine was an excellent test subject for us because he is able to perform all sorts of states in meditation, and that's how we identify the golden standard. So we need yogis like him, and we've been working with Alexander Kaplan, who is working in Moscow State University of Buenos. He was covering India quite a bit, and we had that discussion of, okay, we need to take some kind of standards of yogi from India, from Tibet and other countries as a golden standard for us as normal people to learn what is the state if we take into account these physical parameters and say, okay, so if I'm able to adapt like that, that means I'm actually meditating at the right way for my body to be adapting. The EEG is an extremely interesting tool on one side, but it's also a pain in the neck because you have at least 28 sensors on your head. And imagine normally we explain to the students what is EEG like that. You have a train, and you put 28 sensors on the train. You don't know how the train looks like, but you can have the parameters from the sensors, and that's how you're trying to identify what it's doing, how it's moving, how fast, how the engine looks like. So this is EEG in relation to the brain. So we have a lot of sequence there, but in order to make sense of them, we need context. So all of this together helps us to come to the final point where, in ideal state, any meditator should be sitting absolutely straight with the gaze around 45 degrees to the ground, and their right and left shoulder should be aligned. And during that time, we are going through the actual practice. We had, this is a graph from oscillography. So basically when you're standing, this is how much oscillation is normally there. What we did was interesting because we actually asked people to sit on a platform. So it depends on how much movement there was during meditation, we were able to see the stillness. Because probably you heard in the practice that you need to be still inside, you need to slow down your thoughts. So how do you see thoughts? We can actually identify them through the devices like this, where if you are able to maintain the center of gravity, then it gives you stability in order to be still in your body. So the extra phenomenon that is happening in the body is showing us the disturbance either in thoughts or in emotions. So that's one of the photographs from the actual experiment. We constantly been doing breathing. And also we've included some questionnaires because it's important to identify how much person is able to retain. Because quite often what happens, we go to meditation and we feel good, and that's it. However, we question, so what is your health state? How much you've been able to identify the movements of your body? Are you aware of your body during the process, or you're more focused on one side of things? So we did mindfulness scales, which are very known and qualitative. We have low social usability scale, which is very interesting in itself because normally when people are sharing their experiences, they augment things. Means I was meditating and I saw a dragon flying on a butterfly together on the lotus petals in order to basically make more desirable outcomes to our guru or to peers around. So we've been checking people who are meditating on the question if they're honestly saying their experience or they're trying to impress others. And then the last one is Belgian Health Questionnaire, which is general healthcare questionnaire where we ask about overall state. So the protocol was very simple. We had prep where people were filling out those questionnaires and they've been doing their practice, and then we've been checking the results. Overall, it took us around 60 minutes per person, so it was expensive process, generally speaking. And the main objectives were to really see how technologies sync, because they all are different, so they should be speaking to each other, to identify the correct biomarkers of meditation for that particular individual, and then main patterns among the population. Because if you go and dig into the articles, there won't be a common ground. Everyone will be defining something else regarding meditation. And then the ultimate goal was to identify biomarkers for the altered states of consciousness. So altered states of consciousness you can imagine as a spectrum, as a color spectrum. So where you are depends on if you're praying or you're breastfeeding. All that will be altered state of consciousness, or you're doing painting, or you're just observing something in nature. You're also going into the altered state, but they are different. So we try to identify those biomarkers. So important part for us was as well the body connections. So we speak about 3 brains. So the brain in our head, which is more electric in its nature. The brain in the heart, actually, that is a very powerful thing. It is magnetic, and it's such a powerful magnetic field. It's nearly 500 times stronger than our brain in terms of magnetic field that it's producing. And then the brain in the gut. So that is a very new field of research where gut is understood as actual enteric brain. Literally there are millions of neurons down here in our body, trillions of living organisms, and they live on their own and support our mental health. Quite often when you're in depression, you won't have sweeties and sugars because the bacteria stimulates you, and unfortunately it makes things worse because depression is quite often linked to the problems with diet. And we all eat, for example, in India, we eat a lot of rice. So how does this affect our biome? That is a very, very good question. So I won't go into the details because I know we have not much time, but basically we have the limbic system, which is making decisions for us about the sex partner, where to find food, and basically finding the shelter, the survival part of things. We have neocortex, that's the frontal lobe, that is helping us to see the future and predict things, basically project what will happen out there in the wild, because our brain is very ancient. It's around 5 million years old. And in the past 30 seconds of our evolution of the brain, we had technology, and we're not prepared for it. Our system is not designed for the technological advancement that we have. That's why Constantine was saying yesterday to us that the attention span of an adult was 1.5 minutes, and now it's down to 4 seconds, and the goldfish has 8. Because in the past 30 seconds of our brain evolution, things have drastically changed. We have so many stimuli and decisions to make every day. Before, when you're walking around savannah, what you would see would be an elephant. That would be an event for you. Maybe you will see grasshopper and maybe 15 people at max. That would be a tribe. Today, even in this room, we have more people than the ancient human will see in their entire life. Just pause there for a moment. How much more stimuli we receive? Different smells. different sounds, things that were not introduced before. Even the light that we have, which is very artificial, is stimulating us in a very unnatural way. So our brain is struggling, basically, and that's why things like meditation at this stage are important. Then, as I said about the electrical system of the heart, it's not just the pump itself, it's the vessels that go through our whole body. And it's between the brain, the heart, and the gut. We have the connection which is really known in the tradition, where we connect our immune system, our hormonal system, our nervous system, all together. So I will be, that picture of chakra system, and in devices that I'll be showing and demonstrating in the room later, you will be able to identify and see for yourself from objective point of view how aligned your system is from this point of view. So basically how much your hormonal system is aligned to your subconscious mind, means sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So all of that helps us to see the meditative state from 360 degrees, not just from how many thoughts you have. So as a result, we've been seeing that things, for example, LSD helps you to an extent. However, it's not going to create a permanent result. It gives you a high experience and opens up the whole brain. But unfortunately, later on, you need to do a lot of exercise, and that's where meditation comes in. So I will skip this, and basically stabiliography helped us to create this kind of graphs where we saw that in ideal meditation state, the body is still, the heart rate is slow, and the breath is very, very long. So that's the example of Dzogchen. This is one of the extreme examples where everything basically slows down almost to a minimum. So we know this as yogic states. And now, for the first time in history, we will be able to identify and show this from scientific point of view. So that's where the scientists and sages are meeting. And then we had very interesting experiment on the mandala of Borobudur, which is in central Java. That is a very sacred place to many Buddhists because it's the biggest mandala in the world. So I will, in later on in the discussion, maybe explain a bit more about that. But the fact, in a nutshell, is that despite having lack of sleep, people have been still very actively meditating there, and their physiology has changed. So I will just finish off with this statement that science on its own doesn't have all of the answers, but together with spirit, it can go beyond. Thank you very much.
Yeah. The fantastic presentation by Dr. Lidia Gerasimova. Yeah, she's a neurobiologist as well as a meditation teacher. She made this presentation very fantastic way, and I am extremely thankful to you. Lidia, keep on time. Thank you very much for your nice cooperation as well as the presentation. Yeah, please wait for it.
We now have the honor of presenting a talk of appreciation to Dr. Lidia Gerasimova. I request Dr. Silas